We now have NPM installed, and we're going to use it now to install gulp. So the first thing we're going to do is change back to our working directory, which is our thumbnail-gulp directory. Okay, now that we're here, we're going to install gulp, gulp concat, and gulp react, which are 3 packages that we're going to use to create our build process. The first thing we're going to do is tell NPM that this directory right here is a directory that's going to contain NPM packages. And we do that by just typing npm space init. A little program is going to pop up, and it's going to walk you through the process of creating a package.json file. And that package.json file is what NPM uses to tell itself, hey, there are currently packages installed inside of this directory. We don't have to do any additional configuration here. So for all these prompts that pop up, all we have to do is press enter to get through them. Once that's complete, we're going to install our 3 packages. So to do so, we'll type npm install, then dash dash, make sure you get 2 dashes, save. And we're going to install gulp, gulp-react, and gulp-concat. So make sure you've got a space between gulp, gulp-react, and gulp-concat. What this does is it's going to tell NPM to go reach out and grab these 3 packages and then install them in this working directory. So you'll see some output scroll by, and successfully, if you see this, it means you successfully installed gulp concat, gulp, and gulp react. As a reminder, we're using these 3 packages to automate our build process. We're going to install one more small utility here, and we're going to do that by npm install, and then this time instead of dash dash save, we'll do dash g, just 1 dash, and then gulp dash CLI. And NPM is going to go grab this package as well and then install it. Great. We should now be able to type gulp-v and then see a version pop out. The purpose of this npm install -g gulp-CLI was to give us the command line tool so that we could execute gulp from the command line. As a reminder, we're using gulp to convert our JSX files to JavaScript and reduce it all to a single file. Now we're going to tell gulp how to do this by making a set of instructions and putting them inside of a file called gulpfile.js. Whenever we run the gulp command inside of a project directory, gulp is going to look inside of that directory and look for a file called gulpfile.js. And if it finds it, it's going to execute whatever code is inside of there. So inside of that file, we're going to tell gulp how to run our build process. So let's go ahead and get started with that. Inside of our code editor, I'm going to find my project directory, and I'm going to create a new file called gulpfile.js. So at the command line, we installed 3 packages. We installed gulp, gulp react, and gulp concat. So now we're going to use those packages to tell gulp the build process that we want to execute. So the first thing we're going to do is import those 3 packages. And we do that by writing gulp var gulp equals require gulp. Next, we're going to import gulp-react. And in this case, we're just going to say var react is require gulp-react, and then the concat module. So var concat equals require gulp-concat. So the real key thing to keep in mind here is that gulp out of the box is just a build tool, and it doesn't know how to handle React. It doesn't know out of the box how to handle concatenating files or any of a million other little processes or steps that we might want to include in our build process. Gulp is just the skeleton that we use to run our build process. To have it actually do anything, for the most part, we're going to require other little plugins that work with Gulp and tell it how to do very specific steps. So you can kind of think of Gulp as a skeleton, and then on top of it, we pass these other little packages. Okay, now that we've required Gulp and our two additional plugins, we're going to create the main task, which is what Gulp is going to execute whenever we run our Gulp file. So we'll type gulp.task, and this is going to declare a new task. The task is going to be called default, and then we'll pass it a function. Remember, when we run gulp from the command line, so if I were to type gulp and run it, gulp is going to look inside of this project directory for a file called gulpfile.js. When it finds it, it's going to execute the code in here. And then if there's a task in here called specifically default, it's going to immediately run this task. And the task is whatever we put inside of this function right here. So right here is going to be the code that we write that tells Gulp that we want it to go into our src directory, go into the src directory, convert all of those files from JSX to normal JavaScript, and then concat them all, and then save that new file. So let's do that here. We're first going to write return, and then we start off by writing Gulp, and then we're going to write a series of instructions immediately after it. So the first one is going to be src, then src in a string, src /**. This first step right here tells Gulp, please go into the src directory and load every file that's inside of here. The ** means every file inside of here. Then we're going to make a new line, indent, and say .pipe. And you're going to be seeing a lot of pipes in here when we use React. And pipe basically means first do this, then do this next step, and then do this next step, and so on and so on. So we're telling Gulp, after you load all the files here, I want you to do this next step, which is going to be turn the files from JSX into JS. So we're making use of this gulp-react plugin right here, and all we have to do is execute this, and it's going to tell Gulp, hey, please convert these JSX files into JavaScript. After it's done that, we want to join all the files together, and we want this new file to be called application.js. Then save this new file in the current working directory. So we'll do gulp.destination, which tells it save this current working file, and then /, which means in the current working directory. So in our particular case, thumbnail-gulp. And we'll go ahead and save. So let's walk through this one more time. We installed Gulp. Gulp is our build process. So it's a tool to run our build process. Whenever we run the command gulp at the command line, it's going to look for the gulp file and execute all of the code inside of it. If it finds a task called default, it's going to immediately run that task. In our case, we're telling Gulp to go into the src directory, get every file inside of there, turn each of the files from JSX to JS. For each JavaScript file that we now have, combine them all into a single file called application.js, and then save this in the current project directory. All right, let's give this a shot now. I'm going to save our gulp file, go back to our command line, make sure that we're in our project directory, and then run gulp. Okay, success. you can see here that it started the task called default and it finished it in 67 milliseconds. If I come back over to my code editor, I should see a new file in here called application.js. So this is the file that Gulp created for us. If I open it, I'm going to see that all my components, all my classes are now inside of this file. And you'll see that all the JSX that was in each of them was converted into normal JavaScript. So here is what our thumbnail example looks like in raw JavaScript instead of JSX. You'd also kind of see in here that, wow, yep, writing JavaScript JSX is a lot more fun than writing the JSX that it converts to. Okay, so now that we have our brand new application.js file, we're going to go to our index.html file and require that new script into here. So to do so, I'll make a new line, say script, and we're going to include in application.js. Also take note that now that we have converted all of our JSX files into JavaScript, we no longer need this JSX transformer because we're not converting our JSX in the browser anymore. So we can go ahead and delete it. Now that I have the JSX transformer gone and I've included my application, I'll save the file and I think we're ready to run it. I'm going to find my index.html file and run it. Okay, so nothing pops up on the screen. Let's open our terminal and see what we got. Uncaught error, registered component target container is not a DOM element. This seems pretty strange. Well, let's jump to the chase here, and I'm going to tell you that I led us down a weird path here just to kind of show a lesson and show how we need to enhance our build process from this, what is fairly simple build process. So if we look at our application.js file, let's do a very careful perusal here. If you look at this, the first thing that we do is declare options, and then we say immediately create an element called thumbnail list and render it inside of container. And this code should look really familiar, right? We wrote it in previous sections. Well, here's the problem. Thumbnail list hasn't even been defined yet. Thumbnail list is down here. Our code has been put in a totally random order based solely upon the alphabetical order of each of those files. So this is a problem that we're always going to run into if we do a very simple build process where we just turn each file from JSX into JavaScript and then concat them all together. Our files are never ever going to be loaded in the correct order. We're never going to write our project or create our project directory with file names that match the order in which we want all these files to be loaded. So rather than try to rename each of our files in a way that resolves this loading conflict, we're going to add an additional step into our build process that's going to make this build much more robust, and it's going to mean that we can write all of our file names in whatever order we want, and we're always going to be assured that our JavaScript gets loaded up in the correct order. So I don't run into a case where I'm trying to render my thumbnail list when my thumbnail list hasn't even been defined yet. So let's tackle that in the next section.